Chair, good morning, members, and welcome to the meeting for the Natural Environment Board. As you're aware, the public element of the meeting has been live streamed, and those participating in the meeting have given consent to their inclusion. The recording will be available on the Corporation YouTube channel following the meeting, and it shall be retained for up to 1 civic year. While we endeavour to live stream all our public meetings, technical difficulties may sometimes prevent live broadcasts. In these instances, we aim to upload a recording after the end of the meeting. All personal data will be processed in accordance with the Data Protection Act 2018, and for any further information on that, please feel free to contact us.
Thank you very much, Town Clerk. Very good morning, members of those of you that have joined us or are watching this online. This is the January meeting of the Natural Environment Board in London, and in Phoenix, chair. We have a slight apology for late start this morning. It took us almost 30 minutes to get through praise and lauding Andrew Impey his departure. So you're all ready for a 2 or 3 o'clock finish of this meeting. No, suffice to say, I get all of the bad things out of the way first. But yet again, Andrew's had this now on stereo. It's boring. Andrew, enormously grateful for your dedication and service to this board, to members, to the work of the Corporation and of our incredible open spaces, in particularly the Commons team, a period of transformation and change, deep uncertainty. And I dare say you've developed the ability to navigate and move like a certain chess piece across the governance arrangements of the Corporation, which I have drawn on and learned from, and I'm very grateful. So your ready humour, the dollops of perspective you've handed all of us, and your willingness to work alongside this challenge is being most welcome, but also is going to be sorely. So yeah, thank you, and we wish you the very best as you return to pure conservation as the CEO of the company. That now brings us to item 1, which are apologies. I have apologies from Dan Stevenson. I note that great and eminent Caroline Haynes is joining us online for the first time, rarely. And
only until 11:45, I'm afraid.
Oh, that's okay. So thank you, Caroline. Are there any other apologies that you can note at this point?
Chair, I've just noted Morris's apologies and Alderman Jones.
Thank you. Members, are there any updated declarations under the Code of Conduct? Any items on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 3. This is the annual review of our terms of reference. I think everyone here is well aware of the process that we go through in CR and the changes that will be made to those terms during the course of the next 12 months. So at the moment, this is more housekeeping, updates of names, and sort of the standing data as opposed to substantive points. Are we content to approve these? Yes. Thank you. Very good. That brings us to item 4, which is the Climate Action Strategy update. And we have Heinz here. So would you mind clicking the chat again, just so you have it on the screen? Heinz, over to you.
Thank you, Jane. This is an update on the feasibility study of follow-ups and interest and information. So we've had the University College London team progress this study, and I'm just going to give a little bit of an update of what it's all about. So let's play. So the baseline carbon storage and sequestration is being looked at for oak, thorn beams, and beech pollards across Dipping Forest, Blenheim Beaches, and Ashton Common. Not only the pollards, veteran trees, but also the standard trees, so we can compare like for like how our trees are growing and what rate. This can help us to understand the impact of our interventions, hopefully, potentially going forward, also help us to steer our management appropriately. So a key part of the study is also understanding the sequestration potential of our trees and of our forests. So this is a simulation of the terrestrial laser scan that's been done at Ashby Common. As we progress through the slides, it will become apparent how information can be zoomed, trees can be zoomed in on and understood far better. So here is an example of the standard trees that we scanned. And from that, we can understand the amount of timber that's held within the tree and actually the stand itself as well. The way it's done is the blue areas cylinders, and thousands of calculations have been added this all together, gives us an understanding of individual tree and what volume of timber is held in it, and therefore the volume of carbon as well is held in it. There is an equation for understanding, estimating the amount of timber and volume carbon held underground as well. As you can see from this illustration, you can understand the number of trees, what trees they are, the volume of the trees, the whole stand.
It's the actual trees.
Yes, yes. So those are the individual trees. It's a snapshot of the area, coloured area on the bottom left. It's one of the plots scanned in forest. Here's another one. So each individual tree is understood what species it is. Each species of trees have a different sort of tonnage, weight, the amount of carbon that it holds, but that can all be extrapolated up to understand what volume of timber is held there, and therefore also what volume of carbon is held there.
To give us the age tree and health tree, or is it just?
It's just the volume of the tree, but there is another step involved in the process, and that's called dendrochronology. That's sampling, drilling a core out of the tree, not the veterans, not the pollards. We can only do this for the standard trees. However, there was some pruning, pollarding done some of the pollards. From those, we were able to take away samples. So what a dendrochronology analysis does is look at the tree's ring growth, and you can then work backwards to understand how fast the tree has grown, how much volume it's set on over time. That's a crucial component of the study. Otherwise, you're just understanding the external view of the tree. You want to look inside the tree and understand how it's grown over time. These are a few photos of the study area. These are pollards that were pollarded. So what was done is the UCL team scanned these trees prior to pollarding. They then pollarded the trees, so the ARBS team at Epping Forest then took all the pollarded materials, the arisings, weighed them, so we knew exactly what weight of tree branches were removed. UCL team went back, scanned the tree again, and from that you can give a deduction to understand what volume have you removed, what weight is that, and work it backwards. Then combine that with the chronology from some of the arisings to understand how fast the tree is grown. So dendrochronology provides a precise year-by-year dating, so that strengthens our temporal accuracy of the study. So the tree ring data reveals past climate conditions as well, because it can be correlated with historical climate. This will also allow us to do climatological analysis. What affected trees? How did the climate affect the trees? And so together with the terrestrial laser scanning and the dendrochronology, this builds a clear picture of the long-term effects and human environmental interactions and the carbon dynamics. So this study, although it's looking at pollards and how our pollard trees are growing, including the standards, it's also going to be crucial and inform the reassessment of our carbon sequestration across our open spaces, because we'll have a better understanding and insight to how our trees are growing. Presently, we utilise the woodland carbon code rates of carbon sequestration for our woodlands, and those are based on plantation forestry, might be native woodland, but they certainly don't grow like our unique ancient forest grow. So when we come around to doing the reassessment of our sequestration across open spaces, this will complement and make the results more reliable. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Mike. Very interesting. I know we had this conversation last year, particularly the I think after the Electrical Tree Conference. I mean, I know I sort of give way to Ben and Caroline, who've done so much good work, particularly on the large spaces around promoting and understanding. If you'd like sort of a more common understanding of the importance of what's done in the climate action strategy, and particularly around carbon. I'm just looking at those images. Is that data, again, I know we've got this, is that something that we could share with them, that we could have access to? I mean, personally, I think it's magnificent. It's entirely fascinating. But, you know, I know we're the sort that often go, particularly here, to our colleagues to use things like that to build the curiosity and to push beyond maybe the sort of first level line of, well, it's not my area of interest. But I mean, it's magnificent to be able to see individual catalogue of trees in Epping Forest like that. I think like all of this is part of the tool of, you know, engaging with the public. I'd love us to be in a position where open spaces can begin to use the data, which I know has maybe a purely scientific rationale and use. But I mean, some of that would be fantastic. Some of our more public-facing and presentation elements. I don't know if there's a
I'd say, yeah, I mean, we're looking across the corporation. I think, you know, we want to get back on the front foot of saying we are leading, you know, on the X, Y, Z. This is what we specialise in. We can help, you know, show other councils tools, and we can, you know, work with Endeavour to partner on, you know, research studies and universities and grow up the next generation of conservators and all that stuff. I think this absolutely plays into that wheelhouse in terms of promoting that. A couple of questions just on the actual data though. So critically, when trees are dying, they release carbon back into the atmosphere. And will that also be tracked to look at the impact of that through this scheme?
Yeah, so
no, yeah, of course.
When these studies are done, they do look at the next sequestration. They do take consideration of the emissions of the forest as well as the sequestration. Figures that we produced historically already are net figures. When we say 16.2 kilotons, it's the sequestration capacity of open spaces. That's net.
Yeah. Okay. And then, you know, in terms of looking at trees that aren't within our portfolio at the moment that perhaps are more climate resilient to changes in temperature, to look at what they may look in. So as trees die, we want to look at potentially replacing them with more climate resilient trees to look at the longer term. And then I guess the other thing is looking beyond our own borders. How does this sort of technology allow us to work with other landowners around some of our open spaces today? This is how we're operating. This is sort of the forecasting for the next 10, 15, 20 years as we see it. And how you can help us is by planting X, Y, Z here, or changing your local plan to reflect X, Y, Z. I must say that this is sort of fairly new technology. Yeah. UCL are very excited to collaborate with us on this because they've not done something like this before at this scale, and combining dendrochronology with it to look into the tree and understand the process much better. Yeah. So there will be learnings coming out of this that we can share with others. How we take that forward, we can discuss once we've got the results.
Back, but there's the communication taking out of particularly veteran trees where the interior is breaking down, it's deep, it's a site for lots of insects. Yes. So it accounts for the loss in that as well. Yeah, it will do. Yeah, the team
looking at this are very conscious of the fact that weapon trees are below in the middle. So yes, that will need to be factored in as well.
I mean, Heinz, is there ultimately a business model that UCL are putting together, which is we're going to create a piece of software that we're going to sell to people that does this work? And how do we get in there early, if so?
Not as far as I'm aware of.
Let's help them find that.
There's a lot happening in this field at the moment. We're collaborating with another company, so with Silvera, who are going to sort of tag along with us on this study, and they're going to do aerial drone surveys, scanning from above, scanning within the forest as well. But that's their data. They're happy to share with us that that's going to be able to be correlated with data we do find as well. They'll be looking at above, within the forest, and looking at the soil as well. Their objective is to assess the carbon sequestration potential of forests that are sites, 100,000 hectares they're looking at. It's going to be what that study will be.
And you're like to raise the commercial aspect, because I think there could be, we need to step in and see what commercial benefits are growing in the city. There's almost that companies we're collaborating with. I think so it needs to be a two-way process as well. That we can gain up, because it's what we're going to be incredible.
We've got the connecting, so we can explore that.
Fascinating. And the value that actually technology, we often talk about the open spaces and there's not much opportunity because this is all hands-on work and it's physical, it's people-led, and you can't control nature in that way, but actually this shows exactly the value of technology and, and research.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Yes.
It was going to be good, and thanks to your community for introducing me to Heinz, presentation club in Joy, and we managed to have a very just before I started meeting what we might go on now. So thank you, sir.
Absolutely. Right, that brings us into open spaces, item 5, which is the risk of management update. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is going to mainly a summary risk report of the Natural Environment Division's cross-divisional risk register and also the City Gardens risk register. 4 of the cross-divisional risks are reported in more detail by exception, so I'm just going to go through those. Just I've got so many pages open. Sorry, so one of them is declining condition. The first one is declining condition of assets, and that's reported in detail because we've decreased the risk score. And the reasons for decreasing that are because a significant amount of work has been carried on under the CWP backlog programme. So although it's still a significant risk, there has been great progress that's been made on actually kind of improving the conditions of some of the assets. The health and safety, we've reported this in detail because we've increased the risk score, and again, the reasons for that are explained in the cover report. There's really a big kind of issue around understaffing, particularly in North London open spaces, and that means that we're very concerned about our ability to kind of deliver and implement the health and safety to the required kind of legal standards and processes. That's been highlighted as part of the Natural Environmentality Review, and obviously working on a health and safety audit with Margaret and the health and safety team, which will form part of the business case to actually kind of increase staffing, particularly in North London, in order to address that risk where we feel that there's a real risk of compliance. So, for example, we are using a lot of temporary agency staff to close up the parks, etc. And actually, that's there's risks around that and other risks as well. The two new kind of budget risks, which separate out the BAU resourcing and the natural environment charity preparedness. So we have separated out those, because of the work that's being done on the natural environment charity reviews. So, BAU resourcing, again, I've just kind of covered, the fact that we believe that one of the teams is significantly understaffed. So therefore, there is a risk of not being able to deliver operations safely and effectively. And then the second part of the risk is really around, our fundraising preparedness and actually, the time that it takes to invest in developing and growing our kind of fundraising skills, knowledge, expertise, and also the kind of supplementary supporting kind of, materials, whether that's an ethical donations policy and other kind of other processes and procedures that we need to develop, balanced against some potential kind of risk of expectations that we'll be able to generate additional income kind of fairly quickly. So, we need to manage expectations in there. So that's the breakdown of the changes in those risks, but happy to take in specific questions.
No, that's fine. We're trying to work out we agree on what we're in. We've got to report that out to but Emily, the one thing I just wanted to challenge was the reduction in status on asset management, because I do think we were in a very, very difficult situation here. We haven't been presented with any evidence as a board to suggest that is the case. Sitting on other committees, the read across is that the CWP pot, which is only a subset of all of the asset maintenance, isn't covered. And there is a long shopping list of things I know officers have on that, is unfunded at the moment, is also about 2 years behind where it should be because officers aren't able to deliver that work. So whilst I think you're right in terms of some of that work is funded, we don't yet understand the materiality of that and what has been done to impact the risk overall.
Thank you. And I think that's a good point. It's something we need to kind of share that information more clearly and specifically with those in future. Either Joe or myself goes to our internal kind of governance meeting, officer governance meeting for PA Group, which obviously monitors the spend for CWP backlog funding. Joe, did you want to add anything further on that?
I don't have anything further to add.
I mean, all of our requests have been approved. And we have, requested some uplifts from that group by kind of underspends elsewhere. But there is still, so good progress has been made, for example, in lodges, some of the sub-lodges across the division. But I will take that back to city surveyors in terms of some kind of simple reporting against progress and also where the risks and also the unidentified or not unidentified, but those kind of issues or those additional kind of requirements haven't yet been captured as part of the CW process.
The second part is we keep talking around the risk of the increase in central recharges out to the charities that the national government are sort of overseeing strategically. Perhaps we need to call out that risk because those numbers are going significantly above and beyond. And I know there is a book of work to look at those recharges, but perhaps we need a line item analysis to track the progress.
Okay, thank you. I will capture that. I think that's a fair way.
I think that's something Margaret and I both.
Yes, and is a core or activity or piece of work for the Natural Environment Charity Review this year, looking at those recharges and developing service level agreement approach for our core services. And again, that is very timely and important, and with the proposed issues around local government funding as well, because that would impact corporate services more broadly, and again would have an impact on the natural environment activities.
I wonder, it strikes me, and I don't want us to sort of relitigate past issues or come to this point of sort of piling on your work, but I think so much has been said in corridors and in separate meetings between December and, if you like, RASC this week, just in terms of the reality. And obviously, I've had some questions and conversations with external members around this whole point around the risk associated with operating in accordance with our statutory requirements around health and safety. Obviously noted that Chamberlain's have come back on this health and safety review, which I believe will be internally. And then obviously there's the point around efficiency and the sort of workforce allocation. I just want to sort of on that same basis in that obviously all of that ultimately relates, I hope, to specific individual risks, sort of level 1 risks, if you like, that we have already seen, we've identified and are being mitigated. But is given where we are on the sort of how the concept work moving forward, is that something that you're comfortable reflects where we are sort of broadly in this discussion? Because what I don't want to happen is in effect we sort of get to a point where we then sort of have full health and safety, even an internal review, and in effect either paints a picture where actually the risks were not fully assessed or the potential impact wasn't then known, and there's been sort of there's that sort of escalation chain. So I think it's more just sort of coming to understanding that will in effect was seen to affect. I think we have this conversation around the data driven. As far as I'm concerned, I think there is already sufficient data around resource time allocation and some of the health and safety issues that we're facing across all of the spaces. And I think my question to Sonia and others was, well, if you've seen what we see on the risk register, to me there is already a whole host of things behind that which says there's trend and pattern analysis. And I'm not again, I fully accept the fact that the point was taken that that's what they've asked for alongside the business case. But I'm just thinking about this in the context of how we present risks in a business case alongside the additional work that's now been asked for from Chamberlain's.
Yes, thank you. I think we already do have quite a lot of the information that we require. Margaret and I have a meeting with Alex and Andres, and we've also talked about how we can sort of put in the environment, business services, health and safety advisor as well into that process. So I think a lot of it, the data is there. I mean, for example, drawing out the Save 365, which is our internal kind of, auditing kind of system, North London open spaces consistently failed to, to reach the target of 65%. So they're running about 10% below. And that's due to a lot of the reasons that we already know about, whereas the other teams are kind of, thereabouts. So we do have a lot of that data already, and I think what Ollie will do he and his team will draw all that data together. Again, they work closely with staff across the division, collate it all, but there may be some specific gaps where they actually need to get on site and and plug those gaps. So that it won't be a repetition of everything that's been done already.
That's really helpful. I think that point is really good. It would be helpful that there can be some degree of memory there. Particularly to sort of ensure that position. It sounds like what you're saying is that you're confident that is going to effectively validate the work that's been done. And I know the conversation I've had with Joe before is understanding the snail trail, as it were, on the risk register, seeing where risks move. Because when I look at it, some of these, a number have just been static for a very long period of time. And I think that perhaps there is an acceptance from the management or service committees that they're saying actually that is what it is. It will remain there because either we do not currently have the funds, but we have a mitigation that keeps it there, but that's our risk appetite. But I've been having a number of conversations with, making sure that we understand the difference between our appetite and our tolerance thresholds, and what that means practically. Because what I don't want to happen, and I know all chairs probably feel the sense of you end up in a situation where something happens or comes out in the report. And I don't want to make this about any one specific space or person, but sort of an example, there are a series of events in an open space, and then 4 months later the risk register is now saying this has been moved to a red, and the narrative to members is it's because this thing happened, as opposed to there is a shift that we are noticing. And I think that's the balance between members and officers of making sure there is that feedback, but as those gaps are looked at, we're feeding that back in. Because I see that as a challenge to myself, which is why I took that so seriously. If Chamberlain's are saying we don't actually think there is sufficient data, or we think more work needs to be done to evidence this. I mean, in some ways, like all these things, you want to say, come at Donald Green or City Greens with me, and I'll give you a sort of 2 hours, a run through. But I realise again, I'm tendency to flip it. Marguerite.
Just thank you. The review itself, I think it was a really encouraging meeting with Ollie, and I think the intent really is to bring everything that exists together, certainly from Chamberlain's perspective, so that we have in the end a risk assessment that is RAG rated. So that will help not only with the business cases and making that case, but also help for planning going forward to be able to prioritise works. I imagine that there's a lot that exists at the moment, but having that all in one single report is very beneficial, I would think, for all of the charities going forward. And the focus will be on the North London open spaces first, because that's where the biggest need is already highlighted by the team.
Absolutely.
So,
And that ability to cut through and have a line of sight, whether it's Kenley, Hampstead, West Ham Park, what does antisocial behaviour look like? Or what is the trend, as opposed to the sort of anecdotal or the event reaction response? Absolutely, which we've talked about this morning around how we then use and feed that data into other stakeholders' databases to ensure that the conversations are balanced and informed.
And I think what we need to do kind of more clearly, and I think this has been discussed before, is sort of highlight where actually, sort of tackling those risks effectively is somewhat out of our control. So, at the moment it might be city surveyors, have a lot of the control over the work that's done on the buildings and maintenance, for example. But we will in future have more levers to influence that, whether it's through service level agreements, for example. But at the moment, it's not very evident enough, kind of, where we can make those changes and be effective, kind of in addressing risks internally within our division, where there are dependencies, and where kind of the control actually lies more out of our division at the moment.
Yeah, and again, it goes back. I mean, we've had conversations amongst members around risk appetite statement, moving from closed to openly cautious, and then the conversation, well, what does that mean in relation to given spaces, right? And what risks are we prepared to take? And I think that conversation around members or indeed officers saying, well, I can't tolerate this, what I don't want us to be as a division that's known for the views of individual chairs or particular officers, as opposed to we as the corporation need to deliver, and we cannot tolerate, well, this is our toleration of it. And if it moves outside of that, then it is a crisis. We have set, thresholds for it. Because occasionally I think it's one of those where perhaps sort of individual chairs of those spaces are seen as sort of, focusing on one particular incident, and then people lose again the trend and pattern of what's actually being experienced across the. And I think that's what we can use this one for, is then finesse, funnel, and clarify what that is and take that back proactively. And I guess similar vein to the point I was making to Heinz around what the two, how we develop hooks for the wider common council and I suppose other stakeholders understanding the effects. Any other?
It's a point about the readiness for the environment charity review responsibility. I just wonder that later on we'll be discussing item 12 on land use, but there'll be a further intervention around risk management, certain reputation, safety, or things like that later. But the item 12 raises a few concerns which I think we'll need to go into this item.
I think you have raised some Tony previously when we just went through this in the autumn meeting as well, which I think we touched on, and have been touched on specifically in some of the actual individual based charity committees as well. Are there any specifically that you want to? I might just wait for those. Perfect. Great. Excellent. All right, Emily, thank you very much for that. Can we stay with you? Oh, sorry, that is for. That's for information. Thank you. So item 6 goes to the high level business plan 2026 to 2030.
I'm going to cover that as well because Joe is not able to attend today. So this is the Environment Department High Level Business Plan for 2026 to 2030. And members are asked to note, well, first of all, note the factors taken into consideration complying with the business plan and approve subject to the incorporation of any changes sought by this committee, the elements of the Department's High Level Business Plan for that period. Those elements which fall under the remit of the Natural Environment Board. I hopefully members have had a chance to read and digest the report, so I'm happy to take any questions. I would just note that we've had quite a lot of kind of detailed workshops and a lot of work has gone into this, and we've really kind of focused on actually what is practical, achievable, and sort of really highlighting, bringing out the kind of the majority of the work, which is to deliver the services as required, and also meeting kind of health and safety requirements, legislation requirements, etc. So it's been a kind of real focus in on that, given the corporation's kind of financial pressures and the need to make sure that we're compliant but not delivering a gold-plated service.
Questions, comments, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of my annual deep for this process because it consumes staff, and I think it's so unnecessary to have a high level business plan. I think we have site specific business plan and KPIs, and we should have some kind of departmental and divisional, high level review process. But just the format of this probably needs a whole rethink because it's so layered at the moment, and I'm not sure it's really delivering what we would like to see, is an impact report.
Please, can we take that back to our clerks, because obviously this is a template of a process that's set out by the organisation more broadly.
Yeah, I was going to say, we've heard that. I think credit to Jo, she's done actually quite a lot. So it's sure.
Absolutely.
So that's absolutely well taken. It's a good thing about this is that, as we said before, this is at least this is being used by those site teams. So that's a positive. You're absolutely right. It's taking potential school. Let's keep that alive.
It was just a comment really that this looks very neat, tidy, but isn't like that in practicality as it did deliver. And there's a lot of potential conflict built into here. So my comment really was that managers are doing well to maintain this, given it you've got these priorities that can be.
That is board decision. We happen to agree. And again, subject to promised feedback. Excellent. That brings us to item 7, which is King George's Field Charity, the annual report and financial statements for the year ended 31st March 2025. Clem's just popped up on a very small screen, Clem. Hello, good morning.
Good afternoon, Chair. So yes, item 7 is for information and provides members with the copy of the annual report and financial statements for the King George's Field Charity for the 24-25 financial year, and which has now been filed with the Charity Commission. So happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from us? Yes, Joe. I just have to speak towards the camera.
Oh, yes, sorry. I just wonder, in the review of the charities, whether it sounds sacrilegious, but is there I understand because historically there was a need for this Charity Commission, but why did the charity need to exist? You carry on, it just seems a lot of bureaucracy. So I just wonder it's clearly there and it can preserve perpetuity for passive recreation. But why all the bureaucracy around having a charity to support it when it's fully funded?
That is a very good question. I sit on another committee here which just recently looked at charities, endowments, legacies, and I could not believe how long the list was. And I know a number of those were then picked up. Why have, and there's all sorts of complications around the commitment the corporation was given, the legal framework. What I can say is this was listed on that long list, and there was a commitment for us to then begin to think what we do across the board. I think we're right to question all of those things as to why does it continue? We're talking about that at West Ham Park this morning. Jack, did you want to?
Thank you, Chair. So the Corporate Charities Hub, which was set up by request of Policy and Resources, is based in my team. King George's Field is definitely on the list of one of the charities to look at. There are other concerns in other parts of the portfolio that we're focusing on at the moment, but it's definitely one with the visits. It is looked at as part of the corporate charity review. It is incredibly complicated, and so we just need the time to look into it. But yeah.
So it's been on already.
Just the process point, Chair.
Yes.
you know, where we have other charity reports, we usually have an initial sight of that before it goes to the Charities Commission, because essentially it will be for us to add comments to audit and risk management before they sign it off and send it to the Charities Commission. And if we're going to retain it, we should probably follow that route.
Well, and that was actually my point in that. I think this goes to what you're saying, Tony. We've already got to that point where it's we haven't done the normal process because it isn't, it does walk or talk like a traditional charities. Very good. Let us thank Clem. Thank you, Clem, very much.
Thank you.
And then we'll move on to City Gardens and item 8. And Mr. Tibbets, having failed to attend call over yesterday and having one demerit to his name, is nowhere to be seen.
I did say, yeah, I did say that.
I jest because my joke often the joke is he's absolutely everywhere all the time.
It can't be anywhere, unfortunately. It's not here today, so you have to meet you. So yeah, thank you. So this is the regular City Gardens update. We'll just run through a few things in terms of projects, staffing, resources. Keep the committee updated. So in terms of staffing, we're just running a couple of staff below full establishment at the moment. So we've got 2 vacant gardener posts, but we're going up to recruitment first very soon. Finsbury Circus continues to be a success. We're managing the site in partnership with Mayland, with the contractors, and we'll be doing so for another year a bit. That's all going quite well. The only hiccup being we've got some cracks in a couple of stone boulders there, but they're still under the DTEX liability periods, so they'll be placed across to us. Costs, and we're currently doing some work on establishing a bit of a business space for a coffee cart in there. So just going through the various procurement loopholes around that to see if we can get something there, which would obviously generate some income to help make the garden. In terms of projects, Tower Hill is still on track post the delay that we had with the planning permission from Tower Hamlets there. So we're due to be on site there immediately after the Easter holidays to start delivering that playground. The major projects at Greyfriars Square, which we've discussed before, and Leadenhall Street are both programmed in delivering autumn winter at the back end of this year. And we've got several new projects nearing completion. So America Square, St Olaf Street, Silver Street, St Peter's Hill, St Peter's Thornhill, all due to be finished by the end of March. And in addition,
on schedule,
correct,
and on budget.
In addition to sustainable urban drainage schemes at Knott Road and Port Bread Street are also due to be scheduled for completion on time of the project. We've got Rennie Gardens, which I don't know how much the committee is familiar with, but it's actually just across the river, but just south of Blackfriars Bridge, which has been subject to Section 106 related development. So that's being funded by the development there. And that is sort of coming to fruition now in terms of the design, which we're going to put into, and that should be delivered well. We've finished the planting season with trees, with 29 new trees in the ground, which is the target that we had of 21. So that's
like lost the slot of 8 of them, which was utterly brilliant.
It's got a long way to go.
Yeah. We'll be there for biodiversity, climate action and policy. We've got an update for the biodiversity action plan, which is coming to this committee next committee. And then in terms of volunteering, community and partnerships, we're continuing to work really well with Friends of City Gardens actually and develop that relationship, as well as the relationship with our corporate volunteering partner, Leeds Breathe. And we're at early stages of discussing a potential community maintained raised bed at Breathe Centre. Again, the next bit is around bids and the work we're doing with the bids. Primarily for the EPC bid, to put a large amount of investment into spaces from a capital point of view, and we work with them to maintain them. So we receive revenue funding from the EC bid to maintain those sites. There's one at George Yard and several other sites around that big footprint. So we have regular catch-ups with them sessions and educational sessions as well with their bid members, and we're engaging as well as Fleet Street Quarter and the Culture Mart bids, participating in cross-bid workshops and green coordination sessions. So some really good work there. That's the end of my update. In terms of sort of forthcoming presentations, we agreed as though here with yourself, Chairman, that we bring themed updates. This is the only committee that doesn't have one of those themed updates. The next committee in May will be, as I mentioned, on biodiversity action plan. July will be on projects. So rather than me just talking about projects, we'll bring some visuals and give you a really full update on where we are with all of the projects. And then October will be an update for you.
So I'm taking on them just around thematic and topicals, and then what's covered sort of.
So we'll include the formal targets within each of those work streams.
I was just going to say, Chair, I think really reflecting the golden threads, the National Environment Group is responsible for the National Environment Board strategies, and almost if you have the agenda with the strategy name, and then what sits underneath it as a sort of subsection, which is today we're going to do a deep dive on X, it just ties everything back together. Everyone is pulling in the same direction and focusing on the strategic delivery for the corporation, which is also in the best interest of charities. But I had a couple of other questions just on your report, if I may. One was on just the growth of new projects that we've had in green spaces across the Square City Gardens, which is brilliant and fantastic. But two things. One is the ongoing maintenance costs and what the assessment for that might be, to think about actually, clearly we've got some community maintained, how are those agreements for? Clearly some of that is big maintained, but what does that picture look like? And perhaps we can have a bit of a deep dive to think about that. And the second is, you mentioned the sort of liability checks that are being done. Do we keep a sort of database of when our liability runs out for the developer who's introduced those things, and make sure that the audit is done, obviously just before that deadline, to make sure that we get anything registered that we need to before time runs out?
Yeah, so the second point first. Absolutely. So we have weekly on-site meetings, quarterly partnership meetings, and all of actually we've retained a couple of the consultants, for example, on Finsbury Circus, so specifically around the lawn, which was always a difficulty there. So absolutely, we are very much holding the contractor to their obligations and making sure it's done. We've got a regular process in place for doing that. We're fully aware of when the 2 year to an end. So yeah, absolutely. In terms of ongoing maintenance arrangements, again, I think one of the benefits of the city operations team working together is that we have regular monthly meetings with the team that are developing the projects, which will be the public realm design teams, highways maintenance, city gardens, cleansing, so we fully understand what the ongoing costs of those schemes are going to be running into the future. When I first joined, we were looking at maintenance costs of 5 to 10 years. We're now looking at those for 20 years. Clearly, it can't be compared to maintenance of 30 years. But for example, on the Grove Riders Square scheme there, we've secured the region.
I guess what we're looking for is a headline figure that says, you know, we've introduced 20% more green space in the city over the last 5 years. The cost of that is X, and that is being offset in part by some community scheme or some other sponsorship.
Should we get a figure on that? And then I suppose the other point would be where we're looking to refresh spaces. We're hoping to keep maintenance at least steady on those, if not reduce the maintenance for coverage in planting, less irrigation, things go wrong there, less bedding, or interest year round.
Just a comment, Chair. My family from New York came over in August, and we spent quite a bit of time in the city open spaces. They lived in Manhattan, and they were full of praise. They loved Finsbury Circus, of course, but all the others. And they said they wished that in Manhattan they had just the same high standard and more if they could, because there were quite a few in not very many in Manhattan. But I was so pleased because usually I've spent most of my life listening to everything these people have to so it was really refreshing to know that we did something much better.
Many things.
Very good. I also just want to say, Joe, on this to Jake, well, that I think following the tragic death of Tommy McIntyre, I thought the unveiling of his bench on the Pacific Gradient was absolutely spectacular, and his family asked me to pass on their enormous thanks and gratitude for the way that we've supported them and the wider team, and indeed now memorialised him in the city. So I think it was yeah, it's not often that we get to see the true human face of the corporation as it's presented outside, but yeah, it was absolutely magnificent. Aside from the ponds and then the cafes, my inbox started to have a trickle of things where people now say I'm responsible for what's been voted the most hideous bench in London, which is this new bench on the park that's been reclaimed above the super sewer. Oh, good. It's very regards to that. I didn't think it was, but apparently it's a new city space.
It's a space in the city.
That's being built on top, somewhere near Blackfriars, I think.
Correct. The Tideway tunnel.
The Tideway, yeah. But that's not ours, is it?
Not ours to mainstream. There's a small element of city walkway which goes through it.
Yes.
But the maintenance responsibilities are with Tideway. So we've got to go really with the design all the planting and there's not being to take on.
That's my knee trade, not both. Yes, so, yeah, it's last week. Unfortunately, it's now been subverted completely. Oh dear.
It still gets voted. That's it. He's loved by others.
One other question, and just on this subject of being out in city. I know we've sort of touched on it before, but I mean, as part of my engagement days, and particularly when you're wearing greens and you're trying to work alongside colleagues, I fully now understand the outside of just antisocial behaviour in general, which I know that we're working in, and often the city gardeners being first responders and the sort of basis of our intelligence network as to what's happening on all those sort of things. This issue of cigarette use is much worse than I appreciated. And now being in a position where I've had people flick them at me and seeing them sort of rolling over once people are done. I realise this is a much bigger question, but what is someone told me that this was looked at some years ago, and the view at the time was that we cannot ban smoking in city parks or open spaces. I realise obviously there's a big difference between people vaping, whatever else, but to me it just sounds like where our gardeners are saying that a huge amount of what they're picking out every day is just these rotations of cigarette butts. I realise there's a nudge factor here, which is a separate issue around people being aware, but obviously I'm acutely also aware that our no bin policy relies on the gardeners really being on top of it. And I'd just be keen, maybe it doesn't have to be now, but for us to take that away as a consideration, both from a policy perspective and also how we can address that from a behavioural perspective. Because I mean, my own view was that, sort of smoking was generally being just on a general decline. But again, anecdotally, from what I hear from the city gardeners, it's actually the opposite is true. And that may well be what some people have. No, I wouldn't actually say it because we're in a session, but how the destination city groups have been identified that come into the city now for pure recreation, not just office workers or people passing through. That actually there's been an explosion in people who smoke, not necessarily office workers. So again, back to the point of risk, destination city, great, bringing loads more footfall. I think we've got on the risk register the impact of footfall on open spaces. But I'd quite like to draw this one out and think about how we might address it in one way or another. Maybe not starting with an open type like that.
Yeah, you're right. It's difficult to ban people from smoking. What we can enforce against is if people drop the cigarette. But so we still know, because we do surveys 3 times a year, that it's the most littered item in the city. So you're right, I think it has declined, but it's still there. We have a team of enforcement officers, and we do regular campaigns in areas where the first step is to engage, put out billboards, and go and engage with where we know it's hotspot, engage with individuals, tell them that they can't do it, issue them with a yellow card if you like, and then we'll revisit that site again in a week or two and catch individuals littering, and we do. They'll be issued with a council notice. And interestingly, the last health committee that has just gone with members voted to increase that from £150 to £300. So it's not an insignificant fine. It does work in specific areas, such as we work with the gardeners. I know actually to George's Field, so is specifically one area where we are having problems there. So we will do enforcement. Having enforcement officers on site, in presence there, in high vis vests, body worn cameras, those who do something. So we can certainly, if there are hotspots of cigarette litter, take an approach to that. And I think if people, you can put bins, although we have no litter bins, we do have small cigarette bins, and we put some of those actually in the bin. So we'll encourage people to think. So we can take action on that. We'll take a bit more about how we can look at the spaces more widely. I think there's nothing stops putting signs out saying please do not smoke.
I don't know you on signs and whatever else, but yes.
I'm going to say the police have noticed that actually short, sharp campaigns of signage work much better than longer term. Certainly mobile phone type signage where we spray paint. But maybe that's what it's worth. But again, I go back to CCTV or face recognition data. I mean, it could be really interesting. Well, automatic issue of fines.
I've seen software, AI software overlaid CCTV footage, which spots people trying out. But we'll stick with the enforcement officers at the moment. And I agree on the targets. Certainly, many members already have a specific problem areas, and the constituents let me know.
They've got a particular city gardener who is basically our facial recognition. So like implement my Singaporean model. I'm often told off for that.
We used to give up environmental services. We used to give out little fireproof.
Yeah, we still have those. We still do the same thing. We often for example, we've got problems outside the building. We can buy the City of London friendly.
Very helpful. Any other questions? No. Brilliant. Brings us to item 9, which is any questions raised to the committee. I've had no questions in advance. I see none in the room now. I'm not aware of any other urgent business, unless there are any others. No. That will move us to item 11, which is the exclusion of the public, for us to move the agenda. Members that we can exclude the public. Thank you very much.
Yeah, members please wait by the still advisory.